Hola, ¿cómo estás? Espero que estés muy bien. ¿Qué onda? ¿Qué hay de nuevo? Welcome to today's video. Now, typically I don't make videos like this on my Nate's Adventures channel. Most times you'll find these videos on my website, Spanish with Nate, where I teach you kind of the more nitty-gritty of the Spanish language. But today I want to share with you my biggest 3 struggles when I was first learning Spanish. And maybe we'll also talk a little bit about things that I still struggle with to this day that I can improve upon. So anyways, without further ado, let's jump right in, and I hope this video can really help you if you're learning Spanish. Also, please consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing. It really helps me out a lot. Okay, so first off was sentence structure. So when I first started learning Spanish, and I would practice with my Spanish-speaking friends, my sentence structure was absolutely horrible. It was all jumbled up, and my friends kind of struggled with understanding what I was trying to tell them. But in Spanish, we kind of have this basic formula when it comes to sentence structure. Now, this isn't always true, but most times it is. And that is the idea of subject, verb, and object. Okay, so in this example, Diego compra el pastel. So Diego is our subject, compra is our verb, meaning buys, and then el pastel, which is our object here. So it's subject, verb, object. Okay, and this stays the same regardless of the tense. For example, if I want to change this to Diego bought the cake versus Diego buys the cake, this would just become compró. Diego compró el pastel. Okay, but the sentence structure still remains the same. So I know a lot of people struggle with their sentence structure when they're first learning Spanish. So this is a really good thing to know. SVO, subject, verb, object. Okay, typically your subject is going to be a person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a name. It could be, for example, él compra el pastel, or nosotros compramos el pastel. That kind of idea. Okay, but that's just kind of a good rule of thumb. So that's something that I really struggled with, and I remember very vividly trying to speak with my Spanish-speaking friends and jumbling things, and they were like, Nate, what does that even mean? That makes no sense. You're saying the cake buys Diego? What's going on? Right? So that is kind of what I would used to do, and I used to struggle with a lot. So if you can get that down right at the start of your Spanish learning journey, you're going to have a lot less struggles moving on in the future of your Spanish learning journey. Next, verb tenses. Yeah, so this is probably one of the biggest struggles for most Spanish learners because there's so many different tenses in the Spanish language, and it can be quite overwhelming. Now, the things that I struggled with most was differentiating between the preterite and the imperfect tense, which are both past tenses in the Spanish language. Now, when it comes to these, I can give you a very quick explanation. I think of the preterite as a one-time action, okay? So happens once. Whenever I teach my students, I always do the snapping to kind of say, okay, this is a one-time action. Whereas the imperfect is something that's ongoing in the past. Okay, so if we were to take this verb, right, comprar, and we were to put it in the preterite and imperfect tense, let's put it in the yo form, which means I would say, yo compré el pastel versus yo compraba el pastel. So both are acceptable. However, they have different meanings. Okay, so the preterite means I bought the cake. I bought the cake, right? That's a one-time thing. When I say bought in English, that tells us, okay, right, that happened once. Bought, it's over with. Whereas with the imperfect, if I were to say, yo compraba el pastel, that would mean I was buying the cake. Or I used to buy the cake. But in the context of this sentence, it makes more sense to say I was buying the cake. So I could say, yo compraba el pastel cuando entró Diego. So I could say I was buying the cake when Diego entered or came in. Okay? So that's kind of my quick little explanation for you. And I have a lot of videos explaining this on my website, SpanishWithNate.com, that you can go check out. Okay, next, subjunctive mood. Okay, so more so in the past tense was quite difficult for me. So the subjunctive actually isn't a tense. It's a mood in Spanish. We have 3 different moods. So we have the indicative, which basically is telling us something that is factual. We have the subjunctive, which basically expresses doubts and desires. And then we have the imperative, which is essentially giving commands. So those are our 3 moods in Spanish. But the subjunctive is quite confusing for us when we're learning Spanish. And I definitely used to struggle with this a lot. Especially the subjunctive mood in the past tense can get quite tricky. We won't talk about it in this lesson or in this video, but this was something I really struggled with. Now, I would say that the subjunctive mood isn't something that is absolutely essential to know. Of course, it's important, and of course, you want to be speaking the language properly. But if you're just starting out, don't worry too much about the subjunctive mood. In fact, I want to say in my 3rd or 4th year is when we really started to cover the subjunctive mood in my high school Spanish classes. So you can imagine, I mean, granted, our classes went quite slowly. However, this is something that's typically covered towards the end of someone's Spanish learning journey. And lastly is understanding native Spanish speakers. And I know that most of us as Spanish learners really struggle with. And I'll be the first to say that, I really had a hard time understanding native speakers. And I'll be honest, let's say maybe 6 months ago or so, I went to Mexico, and I went to this really small rural part of Mexico. And sometimes they would say things to me, and I wouldn't understand because of all the weird colloquialisms and things like that, different accents. And I was so shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought my Spanish was at this super high level, and yet sometimes they're saying these weird little phrases to me that I'm just not understanding. But that's okay, right? The way that we get better at understanding native Spanish speakers is by listening to the language a lot. And we'll talk about this. But those are kind of my big 3, was getting the right sentence structure down, not jumbling things up, using the right verb tenses. Okay, do I use the preterite or do I use the imperfect? Oh, wait, should I use this subjunctive mood in this tense? Or, things like that can get a little dicey. And then finally, understanding native Spanish speakers. And this one is definitely an ongoing process that you can improve. Okay, so now if we come over to this side, I kind of put some ways that we can fix these problems. I briefly touched on these points. So when it comes to sentence structure, just remember this, the sentence verb object. That's really going to help you. It's really simple. It doesn't always apply, but 8 out of 10 times it's going to be sentence verb object. Okay, next. Let me scoot over, okay? All right, so study conjugation charts and do written exercises when it comes to verb tenses. Written exercises are super helpful because it's really nice to be able to see written text and see how the language is really working. To say, oh, right, okay, it's this verb tense because yada, yada, yada. Okay, so study your conjugation charts, which are those little T-charts. If you haven't already seen those, once again, there's a bunch on my website, SpanishForNate.com, that you can check out. But those are super important. And then to solidify your understanding of the different verb tenses, do written exercises. Okay? And of course, speaking and listening to the language is the best way to practice. Okay? And then lastly, to improve our understanding native Spanish speakers, we just have to listen to native Spanish as much as possible. Now, my favorite way to do this is through music. I listen to Spanish music every single day. In fact, as I was writing all this stuff on the whiteboard, I was listening to a bunch of norteños, which is a Mexican style of music that I absolutely love. So try to find things like that. Try to find music that you absolutely love to listen to in Spanish. I mean, that could be reggaeton, banda, cumbia. There's so many awesome music styles out in the Spanish-speaking world. Okay? Also, movies, podcasts, shows, and of course, native Spanish speakers are going to be your best resource when it comes to easier understanding native speakers. You could also do audiobooks as well. It's a pretty awesome resource. One little kind of pro tip that I'd like to share with you as well is I read a lot of books in Spanish, actually, and I do it on my Kindle. So if I don't understand a word, I can just highlight it and then have it translated real time. So if you own a Kindle or something of the like, check that out and try that feature. I also recommend when reading Spanish that you read out loud to yourself. So instead of, reading this sentence just in your head, say it out loud. Debo comprar el pastel. Debo comprar. Like that, okay? It's a great way to practice your own speaking so you can become more fluent and more confident just speaking and using the language. But anyways, there you have it. There are my 3 biggest struggles: sentence structure, verb tenses, and understanding native Spanish speakers. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave me a comment on this video. You can also send me an email, SpanishWithNate@gmail.com is my email. And you can also check out my website where I teach you how to learn fluent Spanish. I have my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy on there. And we've got a ton of students, and it's been amazing having been able to help all of them learn and progress through the Spanish language. So definitely check that out. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and also subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a little bit different from the videos I typically create. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments. That'd be really great. Well, gracias. Gracias por ver y nos vemos en el siguiente video. Adiós.